So you came to hear about no one caring about standards and everybody wanting skills. And I'm so pleased that you chose to come to this conversation. So let me tell you a little bit just in terms of framing what this conversation is going to entail. We're going to talk a bit about standards vis-a-vis skills, and also share with you a bit about an initiative that's underway in New York City called the New York City Skills Lab. But to start, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, not all standards are created equal, right? So we know that. So a number of standards are skills-based. However, what I do want to suggest is that when we think about the standards, we know that they may not be all they're cracked up to be. Now look to your left and look to your right. All right. Did anybody lose a neighbor? No. Okay, so everybody's still here. Okay, so there were no like cataclysmic platonic shifts, no body snatching. Okay, so we can have conversations that really look very closely at what standards are and what they're about. So in this sense, because we know that they are an important conceptual model, we recognize that. But the problem that comes with standards is that when we put regard on them as the primary platform and the guarantee that students will graduate ready is where we encounter problems. So what I'd like to do is to suggest that when we look at standards, perhaps there are 3 areas worth considering the potential shortfalls. The first is in terms of accountability. And for those of you who are familiar with or accustomed to a strict standards-based system, you know that in that setting, the accountability is most often on the teacher being able to cite the standard written into the lesson plan that they've prepared, versus in a skills-based environment where the accountability is on a student's ability to demonstrate his or her learning. We know that as it pertains to applicability, looking at standards, a lot of times they are written in a very insular way. And so what that means is that they're segmented and not altogether connected to a variety of settings. We believe that an overarching skills framework is something that can connect settings and can connect learning. And then finally, in terms of accessibility, too often, standards are wrapped in a whole lot of rhetoric and a whole lot of nomenclature that you've got to spend time translating and trying to penetrate and make accessible and readily available to students. Now that's students. Think about if you had the bold idea to connect partners to your work in preparing young people for success in the future. The mystification of what we're trying to accomplish gets all wrapped up in the translation. And so what we want to make sure that we do when we focus on standards vis-a-vis skills is that everything that we call out as a learning objective and a learning target is clear and transferable and relevant to young people. So now, this quote right here begins to answer the question, so why are we not currently all shifting and throwing our collective weight into a skills-based direction? As it reads, both research and practitioners support the hypothesis that skill building is most effective when educators are able to design and deliver developmental experiences that leverage a person's current skills, build new skills, and improve self-efficacy. Now with this, and hopefully folks will agree, but with this, I think what's important to punch out are those last 3 ideas in red. So in a skills-based environment, when we're talking about leveraging a person's current skills, it assumes that we are taking an asset-based approach. And we know right now that across many classrooms, that is not the reality. We also know that in terms of building new skills, the assumption there is that you both know the skills that are in demand, but also how to equip students with it. And we believe that that's an important piece of work. And finally, the notion of improving self-efficacy is about really helping students to have the confidence that they know what they're doing and the ability to represent and present that on their own behalf. So the fact that these 3 ideas are critical practice shifts for us is a part of the reason why, at the moment, we are not more deeply vested in a skills-based frame to teaching and learning as much as we are in many places into a standards-based frame. But let me tell you how we're starting to tackle this in New York City via the NYC Skills Lab. So the NYC Skills Lab is a pilot initiative funded by the GE Foundation to improve the quality and quantity of skill-based learning experiences for young people. The way that we're getting at that work is by having as our backbone 21st century skills as the common denominator. So we are looking at bringing educators and their partners together, be them employers or youth-serving organizations and professionals, to figure out how can we link experiences for young people that actually arm them with a critical set of skills that are relevant and transferable and meaningful in their lives, but also meaningful in multiple contexts. The reason why we're doing this work is because we know that the skills that the world demands are not often the things that are being taught to students. So our drivers are three. The first is to bring folks together in co-constructing experiences where they co-construct and co-design learning. The second is to actually provide technical assistance and support to teams on site. And the third is to really provide a level of resource that allows each of those teams to have autonomy to figure out how they choose to further incorporate 21st century skills into their environments, whether it's the school building or the community-based organization setting or the internship office. And so all of this work together, we believe, will actually bring about the change that has, as a basis, a place where young people can know what they're striving to accomplish and have opportunities to reach it through mastery. Now, at first blush, you might think that this conversation is much like every other conversation. Everybody wants to do college readiness, right? Everybody wants to do career preparation. And a few bold people are saying 21st century skills are somewhere in that mix. For us, though, the way that this is different from ordinary practice is that we're paying as much attention to mindset as we are practice. So a lot of this work is around how do you start to orient people to first recognize that there is, as a basic norm, the expectation that all students have access to a critical set of skills that they're able to learn, show, and demonstrate, right? That's a thought. That's a belief system that needs to be in place. But moving beyond the notion of that basic norm, we also have to have people recognize the validity and value of those skills. And so what we've done in terms of the efficacy of that work is to bring together professionals, practitioners, educators, and their partners to talk about what they're learning as they're trying to link these experiences on behalf of students and on behalf of the community. And then finally, the idea of capacity building is about actually providing direct support to people, right? So it's not so much the professional learning community, but it's going to where they are. And I don't know if you're catching the subtlety of that idea, but a lot of times when support is provided, it's a draw. You have to come and receive it, as opposed to us going to deliver it, okay? So the pieces of work that the teams are organized around are different sorts of activity types. They are building everything from work-based challenges that look at a need inside of a professional or industry-based context to simulations and campaigns that are really organized around a student need or a student interest. And altogether, these experiences are the sorts of things that are a starting point, but they are by no means are the ending point. And for many people who are trying to think about doing skills-based work in their own community and context, there are so many points of entry. You could simply look at an existing lesson plan, an existing program model or design, and peel through it to see where there are opportunities for me to embed 21st century skills. What's already buried inside of this experience, but how do I now accentuate it so that now it's a very intentional and purposeful learning experience that's high impact for my students? You can also use the skills, and I actually have a one-pager and key tag in the back of the room for you, as a piece where you can actually look at building and co-constructing experiences. So it's not assuming that no one has anything in hand that's salvageable, right? You can enhance it, you can build it anew, or you can simply focus on the conversations. Because we know with our community partners, some of their work is around actually engaging with young people in terms of feedback. And that's the other big idea. So when we want to talk about skill development for young people, feedback is the vital drum that must be beat. For us, what that means is looking very specifically at how young people have an opportunity to both reflect on their own experiences, but also receive very constructive direction about what they could do next and what they've done well. Feedback is the sine qua non, if I said it right, that actually serves as that real true piece that allows young people to now be graduated and move along with a sense of this is what I know how to do. This is the evidence that I can point to as substantiation of that ability and the real meaning that I carry with me in portable contexts. So now there are two questions. If skills are obscured, overlooked, or understated, what's the consequence for teaching and learning? we could imagine that there are a number of things that happen, right? Students are disaffected, disengaged, a lack of awareness about ability. But if the skills are made more clear and revisited, what's the consequence for teaching and learning? And we would assume that there's a real chance for mastery. We would assume that there's a real chance for students to have an ownership of self and a possession in their abilities. And so when you look at these two ideas, by and large, I would suppose that most of us would agree that we inhabit that top reality, right? And so the question now becomes, what do we do as a community to really organize ourselves better so that that reality doesn't remain the reality? Now here's a question. What if the 54 million students currently in our K-12 system ultimately graduated with a solid skills profile, both in the sense of being skilled and having that definite personal awareness about their skills? How might the world be different? See, the work here is really about a life agenda. We're not just organized around satisfying the talent need of employers, but we're also really trying to think about how do we, both in New York, but how do we as a larger community, begin to have conversations that equip young people with the tools and the skills that are instruments for their own life, that provide them the agency to be able to go into different settings and really speak about worth and really speak about contribution and know fully, without question, that they are vital to the success of our communities. So the GE Skills Lab is one of 3 large projects as a part of the model redesign team. If folks have had a chance to hear any of the other New York City presentations, you might have heard about our Mastery Collaborative, which is focused on building a network of communities and practitioners coming together to talk about how they do mastery inside of their schools and buildings. And we also have our EPIC schools that were presented and talked very much about how do you do this wall to wall inside of a school. Not just as a program, not just as a collection of partners, but as an entire building oriented to this aim. So thank you. I think my time is up, and I will close with that. Thank you.